This is the podcast overview for Chapter 13, Personality Theories, Objectives. So this is a really fun chapter. This is kind of the reason a lot of people go into psychology, is to try to figure out why we are the way that we are, which is really the crux of personality. So you're going to be taking a look at all of the various theories about why we are the way that we are. And I say theories because each one presents a different set of constructs or concepts that help us identify people and their ways and their traits and their personality characteristics. So there isn't one sort of right way to understand personality. It's just where is emphasis placed in understanding personality. So we're going to have a little bit of history in here. We're going to go back to the beginnings of psychology and as well to more recently how we construct personality. So first is to define personality and identify several traditional perspectives in the study of personality. We're going to start off with Freud. He's going to be like the first quarter of this chapter. Explain how the mind and personality are structured according to Freud. What are the different components of the mind? How does he break it down? And how does he conceptualize personality? He has what's called psychosexual stages of personality development. So he's very much a stage theorist. He states that people develop their personality in distinct stages that are psychosexual, so related to psychological needs and sexual desires. That's Freud, right? And this is why Freud is so popular and his name gets around. So you're going to distinguish between what those 5 psychosexual stages are of personality development and kind of like the major milestones of each of those stages. Then we'll describe how Neo-Freudians modified Freud's theory. So Neo-Freudians are simply new Freudians, right? They're people who follow Freud's theory, but kind of put a little twist on it, a more modern twist to understand it today, because a lot of Freud's theories have sort of gone out the window, have been a little debunked, but there's some core tenets that really have held. So what are those? You're going to find that out when you look at those Neo-Freudian ideals. Then you're going to evaluate the influence of Freudian theory on modern personality theories. What did stick when it came to Freud's theory? What have we hung on to? And what do we now transfer into therapies that are dedicated towards understanding people and their personalities through Freudian theory, which is the psychoanalytic perspective. Then we're going to compare and contrast learning theories of Bandura and Rotter. They had a lot to say about how our personality develops due to learning occurring over the lifespan that we take in from our environment, and then that changes our perspectives and our characteristics. We'll evaluate the strengths and the limitations of the behavioral and social cognitive learning views of personality. So those are specific to understanding people and people's personality in terms of their behaviors and how they think about the world around them and how people around them affect them. Okay, so that's behavioral and social cognitive. Then we'll get into humanistic perspective on personality, which is largely the work of Carl Rogers. How does a humanist explain personality? Where does personality come from? And what are the strengths and limitations of this humanistic view of personality? How would a humanistic psychologist say that one develops a sense of self over the lifespan? Then we will look at early attempts to try to use traits to conceptualize personality. So here's where we get into trait theory. that our personality is composed or comprised of various traits. Well, how do we assess traits? Where do they come from? How do we decide what traits? You're going to be looking at some of the more popular models, one of which is the 5 trait dimensions of the 5-factor model of personality. This is a very popular model of personality. It's known, I guess, to many people as the Big Five. The Big Five traits of our personality that everyone pretty much falls into one end of the spectrum on each trait. So you'll be looking at that. And then we'll examine, again, the strengths and limitations of the trait view. Then we'll turn to looking at some research. How do certain studies, like twin studies and adoption studies, help us to understand the role of genetics a little bit better in assessing personality and understanding personality? And how has the role of neuroscience changed what we now think of when we try to assess personality? And what has been its role in the biological basis of personality? So some of our personality is inherited, right? It is in our genes, it's in our DNA. We are who we are because of our parents. However, that's not the whole pie, right? That's a piece of the pie. And then I guess the other piece of the pie really comes in through understanding personality from all of these perspectives. This is the environment and how you grow up, is the nurture side of personality. So then you'll want to summarize current research on heritability and neuroscience of personality. What contributions does it make to personality? And then assessments. And this is kind of like the latter quarter of the chapter talks about how we assess personality. You'll be looking at all the different advantages and disadvantages of various methods to assess personality. How do you decide what kind of personality a person has? Well, you can do interviews, you can do behavioral assessments, you can use what's called personality inventories, which are just basically a bunch of measures designed to get at one's core personality structure. So questions a person answers on a questionnaire. And then there's projective tests, right, that can get to sort of the deep-seated aspects of one's personality. This is very much the Freudian or the psychoanalytic use of personality tests. And so there's some advantages and disadvantages. And then what ways might you informally assess the personality of others, right? Because these are all formal assessments, like someone has to sit down and take a survey, take a test, answer a bunch of questions, and see what they get and see what that says about their personality. It's a very formal way, but we have a lot of informal ways of understanding people and going, oh, she's a kind person, or he's very hardworking. Well, those are traits. Well, how do we know that? Did you give someone a survey? Probably not, right? You've seen them in action. So we watch, largely watching other people is a big way that we informally assess, but there's some others as well. So that wraps up personality, help you to understand a little bit more about why we are the way that we are. And I just want to mention that this chapter is a very kind of important and pivotal chapter that we're going to come back to actually when we start covering mental illness and we start looking at abnormal behavior. And we start looking at the different types of abnormal behavior and different types of mental illness that can happen. A lot of times it's largely tied to personality. And all the theorists that are mentioned in this chapter are going to come back up again when we talk about therapy or treatment for mental illness, because the therapeutic techniques that psychologists use when they are working with a client who has anxiety or depression or schizophrenia, those therapeutic techniques come largely out of personality theory. They come from the work of Rogers and Maslow and Freud and Bandura. They come from understanding people and how a person is structured, so that they can then take that and use it towards helping people who get stuck, who have a mental illness that prevents them from living life to the fullest and having full well-being. So we start seeing how these theories are applied when we start talking about abnormal behavior and treatment of abnormal behavior. So this is going to be a chapter that you probably come back to when we get into mental illness and treatment and therapies.